statements. We just looked at an if statement. With an if statement, if the condition is true, you do something. If the condition is not true, you just don't do anything. With an if-else statement, you check the condition. If it's true, you execute some statements. If it's not true, you jump to the else and execute those statements. So adds a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more power to what we're trying to do. So here we have A plus is 990. 990 is greater than 100, prints out greater than 100, done. If A plus was not greater than 100, it would then switch over to the else and execute those statements. So here we have num is 50. 50 is not greater than 100, so it jumps down to the else and prints out not greater than 100. So you get the general idea, right? With just a single if statement, if num was greater than 100, it would do something and it would be done. With the if else, it's going to check that greater than 100. If it's true, it's going to execute the statements attached. Otherwise, it's going to go to the else and then execute those statements. And there's just another example with the greater than or equal to on the comparison. And here we have UIL scores 200. If it's greater than 190, print out team, which it is. Otherwise, print out bench. Let's work through some code so we can get a little bit better idea how this works, and we can see the things change as we go to make sure we totally understand what's happening here. So in this example, X is set to 250. I'm comparing it to 300. If that condition evaluates to true, I'm going to print out first. If it fails, it's going to switch over to the else and print out last. So let's run it. See what happens. It's going to do exactly what you think it's going to do. It's going to print out last because 250 is not greater than 300. So I'm going to change this to 450. And I'm going to run it again. And run it this time, I get first. So with an if else, if the if is true, it executes that block of code attached to the if. If the if fails, it jumps down to the else and executes that block of code. So now let's spice it up a little bit. We're going to put in an if else. Or sorry. And we're now going to make an if else structure. So the way this is going to work, if the first if is true, it prints out first, it's done. If the first if fails, then it's going to check the else if. If the else if is true, it's going to execute that code and then it's done. Otherwise, if neither one of the if and the else ifs are true, it's going to the else to execute that code. So here I have 450. And I'm going to compare 450 to 300, and we're going to see if that's true, which we just checked, and it was. Now I'm going to change this to 250. Now when I run the code, I compare 250 to 300. That fails. I jump down, compare 250 to 200. That prints out middle. So both of the conditions, or multiple conditions, cannot be true. Only one can be true. And if neither of the conditions with the if, else, if are true, it's jumping to the else. So let's change this to 500. Now, sorry, 550. Now 550, it's greater than 300. It's also greater than 200. But the 300 is bigger than the 200, and it's checked first. So it's going to execute that chunk of code first because that first condition is going to be true before it checks the second one. All right, pretty straightforward, right? So if I've got if, else, if I've got 65 of these things, it can only execute one of them. Only one of them.